To get a better understanding of the different types of supports, let's just go ahead and separate them into different classes. Starting off with the most basic ones is going to be the melee champions that attack the enemy. We have our fundamental support here, Alistar, and then Alistar, Leona, Rel. They share very similar things. They get on top of the enemy and they get a fight going, basically. And then you have other champions such as Zakamumu Nautilus that do that in a little different way. And then a champion like Blitzcrank that starts a fight with a single hook. So there's different ways of doing this same sort of thing, which is attacking the enemy essentially. And then we have multi-purpose champions, but let's go ahead and go to the protecting melee champions, which we only have two options. It'd be nice if they expanded this roster, huh? We have Braum and Tarek, and with these champions, their whole focus is to protect their allies. So being a pretty easy counter to champions like Alistar, Leona, and Rel, because they dissuade everything that they do, and in fact make it where if these champions go in more often than not, a champion like Braum and Tarek will just make the fight in their favor if the enemy is engaging. So then we have multi-purpose champions that kind of do, they do multiple things. With Bard, he's more similar to the Enchanter support, so we might come back to him. With Thresh and Rakan, though, they start out the game usually attacking the enemy, but later in the game, they transition into the peel and protect role, which, say, a champion like Alistar can't necessarily do as well, because Thresh and Rakan, they have their shields that they can level up later into the game, but can use their attacking components a lot more consistently earlier in the game. But let's say if Thresh tries to move into 5 enemies by himself, late game, he's not going to be able to just go for a 5-man flay, whereas Alistar can go for a 5-man combo late game, no problem. If Thresh does that, he's going to get blown up instantly and not really achieve anything. And then the non-standard supports, such as Galio and Maokai, they serve different purposes, kind of just standing their ground more often than not, and then can go in or can peel for their allies, depending on how the fights play out or given the lane matchup. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the Enchanters here because they're a little different compared to the other champions. Kind of ignore Pike for now. So anyways, we have the Enchanter Poke, which is Karma, Lux, and Nami. These champions really attack the enemy early. Lulu can kind of do this, but it depends on the matchup. But regardless of the matchup, Karma, Lux, and Nami, they always want to achieve poke against their lane opponent, and then that's how they get an advantage. Now, even if you're playing these poking supports, you always want to just play for the poke early, but then you're still going to transition into the peeling part of the Enchanters, where you usually put 2 or 3 points in your poke ability and then start maxing your shield. And that's how you're going to be able to transition into the mid and late game, because even if you want to poke the enemy mid game, right, a level 6 Karma to a level 11 Zed, he does, okay, a level 9 Zed, let's be a little less generous. Level 9 Zed, that Zed's going to one-shot the Karma for the Karma getting 200 damage onto the Zed, so it's not a very viable strategy. Whereas if the Karma if the Karma was to max her shield, then she's going to be able to provide for her ADC, and the Zed's not going to be able to kill her ADC, for example. So you always need to transition how you're playing on these champions, where most players just get totally tunnel vision on casting my poke ability on the enemy. That's awesome, but then it all falls apart mid-game because it's not how the champion functions. And then we have the peel supports. These champions are primarily designed to just protect their allies, and usually protect a single ally. So we have Janna and Lulu as our main examples here, whereas Morgana is kind of in a weird spot right now, and then is kind of single purpose with her black shield. So with Janna and Lulu being our good examples, they most likely want to be paired with a hyper carry because their abilities are single target. Lulu's W, Lulu's E, Lulu's ulti, that's all going for one person. And then Janna's shield, you get 2 Janna shields and an ulti. The ulti is AoE, but it's mostly just for the backline. You're not going to be using that to heal your frontline more often than not. So with these supports, they're primarily going to be used to protect their allies in the mid to late game in different ways. And then we have Enchanter Carries. I mostly put Enchanter here because most of these champions kind of fall under Enchanter, other than kind of the Senna and the Pike. But it mostly just means like supports that function as a carry. So even though you're playing these champions in the support role, all of them mostly are just a carry that is being played in the support role. So Sona kind of becomes like a team fighting champion, really sucks at laning, and you're kind of just standing still for the first 12 minutes. Seraphine can do some things in lane, at least she can control the minion wave. Senna, really have to have a lane matchup to achieve anything. Soraka, Yuumi, all these champions, Zillion, Pyke, they all kind of just stand still in lane. And then if you don't have as many tools as the enemy early, but then as the game goes on, you start functioning as a carry in different ways. So Soraka carries through her healing, Yuumi carries through her healing, damage, and then just utility of adding stats to someone and then being inside someone as well. And then Zillion carries through his control. Pyke carries through his ulti. Way different than the way the other champions do. And then Seraphine and Sona carry through their team fighting and peel ability. So it's a very interesting archetype and one that everyone just kind of lumps these champions in with other like Poke, Enchanter, Mage, things like that, and that's not where they fit. They really, really are a carry just being played in the support role, and you have to play them as such. They're not playing for their allies or just for the ADC in a certain sense. So if you're playing with these champions as an ADC, you also have to play differently. With the mage supports, I would imagine most people will be familiar with these because most players that get on a fixation on climbing, they'll usually find a brand support advice. Everyone says to play this champion as support for some reason. Like for the past 4 years, it's like, well, if you want to climb on support, it's every noob's advice to another noob. Play brand support. Don't play this guy. He sucks at support. Play Xerath instead. But anyways, with the brand, with the mage archetype, these champions function to deal damage to the enemy and gain an advantage through that. Now, it's very hard to get champions in this archetype because it's fundamentally an overpowered archetype in the support role. You shouldn't be able to deal as much damage as the enemy can without having as many items, gold, and XP. Like, it shouldn't work out, but every now and then you'll find champions that are effectively overpowered that can be plugged into this archetype in the support role. One of the strongest ones ever being Misfortune Support. Whenever you could play that as support, maxing the E, building things like Black Cleaver, Executioners, and just ulting the entire enemy team, which has since been nerfed, but God bless, we love Misfortune Support, rest in peace. The strongest ones in this role right now is Xerath easily. I would say Karthus is similar to Xerath, but way more niche, way harder to pull a Karthus off in the bot lane. Whereas with Xerath, he has very natural scaling, has really good item build, only needs 2 items to function effectively. Whereas champions like Brand, Vel'Koz, and Zyra, they're all very short range. This is what really ruins them in the mid to late game right now, is that even if they win the lane, they can't really use it because if they get in range of the enemy, they are instantly dead. Every champion in Season 12 has 2 dashes and an insta-kill move if they're near you. So these champions aren't really having a great time. Whereas a champion like Xerath, he's off their screen killing them. A much better equation, am I right? So yeah, that's the mage archetype. Again, the main thing for them, the fundamental of these champions is that they gain advantage in lane through dealing damage to the enemy compared to other champions that land their CC or poke a little and peel a little. These champions just deal damage, and if they aren't dealing damage, they're not doing anything. And they have to scale into the mid game or they aren't useful for the most part. And then you have one-use champions. These are champions that are very hard to define, but can be played in the support role, but usually just have a single use. So a champion like Ivern, let's say you could put down your bushes for a champion like Caitlyn, or you could even have a Rengar ADC with a weird champion like Ivern. An easier example is Shin. His single use as support is his blocking auto attacks with his W, and then using his ulti. Trundle is basically a pillar in the support role. Nico functions to engage on the enemy. You could also kind of put Nico in the mage role, but she's having a hard time recently. Kale, you're ulting your ally. Malphite, you're ulting the enemy. Nasus, you're pressing W on one person. Poppy, you're blocking a dash with your W. So it's very easy to plug non-fundamental supports into something like this, and that's usually how they play out. They have a single purpose that makes them playable in the support role, but don't necessarily excel generally, which is why you usually don't see these champions doing very well on the ladder, because you have to cover a lot of bases usually, or excel in one thing like a champion like Xerath, which these champions usually don't. They just have their one trick, and if the stars don't align, it doesn't even really matter. So that's a general overview of the supports. Hope that gave you a better idea of the different types.